What you see on television is usually the news bite where they take this quote, this gaffe, this sound bite out of context. And so the voter's impression is really fairly narrow. Having been through the campaign, and Larry too, we probably saw all of these things in context. So the reaction that I had wasn't as bad as, let's say, the news media or some voters.
You want to have a narrative, for your firms and for your partners and for the people that you want to put out there. The same thing as I want to do for my clients, and anything that you can do to reinforce that narrative is a good thing. What happens in campaigns, though, it's not about reinforcing your narrative. It's about taking your version of what the other guy is.
Those cameras are going to be on you the whole time, and whether you're speaking or not. So you cannot afford to look indifferent or condescending or arrogant or anything else, because the camera will see that.
The lesson, again, for those who have to work with lawyers in the media, where they're talking about their clients or whatever, you just have to remember, if they make a mistake, who can clean it up for them?
One trick I do with Dwayne Morris lawyers, I insist, we practice interviews, I insist, use the reporter's name. Gina Passarella. Gina. Because if you're using her name, that puts you in a relationship where she gets to talk and then you get to talk. Not, let me tell you the world according to me. Because that's a dangerous situation. You've got to listen to what's actually being asked. You don't have to answer what's being asked, but you should know what's being asked.
Josh, that works in the inverse too with reporters. Because a lot of times reporters are not listening to responses from the people they're interviewing because they're thinking about their next question.
Right. So what's your weapon for your client to combat that problem?
Well, my weapon's always is don't worry about what the question is. Just say what we need to say. And by the way, that's what happens in those debates. Yeah. I mean, everybody knows that, but they don't answer the questions. They just get to what they want their talking points.
Candidates generally can't catch a break, because if they're too scripted, the reporters will write. Look at Obama. Every speech he ever gave was off a teleprompter. Mm-hmm. So reporters were always, on his case that how scripted he was. Once they go off script and have a gaffe or some goofy moment, that's what the reporters will report on. Do your best to thread the needle here. Don't be so off the cuff that you're going to say something stupid, but don't just say the same answer to every question, because after a while the reporters are going to completely lose interest in it. You just have to assume that somebody has got a recorder or an iPhone and is going to pick up whatever you say.
Candidates have never had to go through this type of scrutiny before, because always being on. So I've been around people, Ken's been around people, you've been around lawyers who are really smart, who say stupid things that you just, and so I think that you're being held to such a standard. And so what happens to these candidates we were talking about before is they get gun shy. So then you're afraid to say anything, because you don't know how it's going to be taken. And I'll tell you, and I think that's one of the reasons that I've been involved with 25 years. Ken a little longer than me. But what I have seen is a diminishing of the quality of people in elected life. I think because of this.
Diminishing in quality or communications ability or what?
Quality.
People
and by the way, not only in terms of the people in office, but the people who are on the staff levels and working in government. It's the same thing, because of all of this.
It chases good people away from the process, is what you're saying.
Let me just mention the other side, of course, and that is the pressures today in the media world, talking about the media business world, are such that there are fewer reporters covering. You're relying on all kinds of social media and other sources that they can't corroborate, with facts. Reporters, frankly, can be very lazy sometimes, and they'll take what a politician gives them and they'll report it as given. So you're up against what Larry said, and you're also up against what's going on in the media world today, which is very different than the way it used to be.
If your client, your lawyer, is headed for a big speaking engagement, especially in front of a lot of people, look at this kind of thing. Highly quotable lines. By the way, in interviews, Clinton used to say this. He would say, here's the important thing to remember. He said that a lot. So then the reporter would write down the next 5 or 6 words, and he was free to do one of his circuitous arguments to get there because he told the reporter what the quotable was. And quite naturally, not, I need you to report me saying X, Y, Z. He would say, here's the thing I want you to know. And the reporter, even unknowingly, would say, this is going to be the quote. And that, in fact, was what ended up in the piece. He did that more smoothly than anybody else I've seen, although, fair enough, Ken, Reagan at his best, nobody could beat him.
The other thing, and again, when you're working with your lawyers, I don't know if any of you have ever met him or whatever, but he has this way of just locking into you.
Nobody else exists.
Right. And I watched this. He was in for Kathleen Kane in the fall. And I took my 85-year-old mother, okay? And she talked to him, and she said she was originally from Pittsburgh. He said, "Oh, I know." It was like amazing. I mean, and that's what he does. So I would tell you with your lawyers, they have to try to do that.